I've been a Star Wars fan since middle school. I love the movies, I love the games. Believe it or not, I'm one of the few people who admits to liking the prequels, even though they had their flaws like Jar Jar Binks and the horrible dialogue from Anakin in the second and third movies. I still enjoyed them. So when I was told there was going to be a new Battlefront game coming out, immediately I was hyped. Then when I found out it was EA DICE making the game, I groaned in disappointment. Why, you ask? Because right after DICE released Battlefield 4, they got heavily criticized for the game. I'll be upfront, the game was borderline broken. Some people, including me, would even say that the game came off as rushed and unfinished. It took EA nearly 4 to 6 months to fix all these problems that the vast majority of players were having. Even after a year of Battlefield 4's release, it was still getting some significant patches to the game. Even one of DICE's producers, David Sirlin, explained that the company realizes that Battlefield 4's release hurt the trust of the franchise's fan base. That alone should tell you something. Now, I'd never played Hardline, so I can't say anything about it. I don't even know if DICE made it, to be honest, but I was really worried with Battlefront due to how terrible my experience was with Battlefield 4 in its initial release. I even mentioned this in my Racer Revenge review I made many months ago. But were my worries justified, or am I just being pessimistic towards the developer? Let's find out. Well, if you've seen my reviews before, you know that I like to start off by talking about the story mode or single-player campaign. Battlefront doesn't have one. Alright, it sort of does. I mean, you can play in a training mode, single-player battles, and survival mode. Single-player battles are basic, and I mean very basic matches that play like Kill Confirmed from Call of Duty. You either play as a hero or just a regular soldier. That's all there is to say about it, other than the fact that your friendly AI is just bad. Survival you can play by yourself or with friends. For some bizarre reason you cannot join or host a game with random people. Why? I don't know. Great question. Anyway, the survival mode is alright, I guess. It's painfully boring playing solo, but with a friend it's not too bad, but I can't imagine many people playing this more than a half a dozen times. Yeah, I could go into more detail about what you can do in survival mode, but because I doubt it'll be played all that much, I just don't see the point. Have you ever played a horde-based mode or a survival mode before? This one isn't that much different. So already we're off to a pretty crap start. The older Battlefront games that came out more than 10 years ago had campaigns and other single-player based modes, and they were great. They were incredibly fun. I can play the campaigns from the older games to this day and still get loads of entertainment from them. However, this game is all multiplayer driven, which is a letdown for those of us who don't want to play multiplayer games all the time, and believe me, that number is a lot larger than you may think. Moving on, let's focus our attention to the graphics. I have nothing but positive things to say about the visuals. I mean, holy Christ, Battlefield looks great. I'm very impressed by the level of detail both with the map design and the character/vehicle models. Seriously, the game looks like an absolute masterpiece. I don't even see how anyone can deny that. Another thing I enjoy, which I guess kind of relates to the graphics, is that when you are in a massive firefight with like 10 people on both sides shooting at each other across the maps and seeing all those lasers going back and forth, there's no other way I can describe this. It just looks cool. Another big positive about Battlefront is the sound. I know it's probably needless to say since it's Star Wars and all, but the music and sound effects are flat out amazing. Even more so when you're playing this game with a headset or a surround sound theater system. The voice work isn't that bad either. Outside of the heroes, I expected the regular soldiers to have, less than stellar acting, but they did a pretty fine job with it. I can't really complain all that much. Then that brings us to the gameplay of Battlefront. Well, it's a mixed bag. There are things I really like about the game, and also things I flat out hate. First things first, a lot of people, actually a ton of people, compare this game to Battlefield since, of course, it's made by the same people. Some of which are saying Battlefront is just a reskinned version of Battlefield. I've played a handful of Battlefield games, and I just don't see where that reskin complaint is coming from. Yeah, there are similarities between the two games, such as Walker Assault playing very similar to Russian Battlefield, Supremacy mode is basically Conquest, and for the most part the character movement is very similar between the two games. I sat here playing the game for a few hours just trying to find reasons as to why people would think this is a reskinned game, and I couldn't come up with much of anything that would even make any sense to complain about. Anyway, as I mentioned, Battlefront's controls are very similar to Battlefield 4's, although perhaps a little bit more fluid. You can't aim down the sights with the exception of guns that have scopes on them. Instead, you just kind of zoom in slightly like in old first-person shooter games. Like in the previous titles, you can play this in a third-person view if you prefer, so the people that don't like first-person views, there you are. Instead of the typical perks or equipments that we've been used to in recent shooter titles, we have what are called star cards. You can hold a maximum of 3 cards per hand, and I believe you can unlock more hands by leveling up. 2 of the 3 slots are used for equipment and weapons such as grenades, rifles, and jetpacks, while the middle slot is for charge-based stuff like focus fire, which makes your guns more accurate, and ion shot, which increases the blaster damage done to vehicles, shields, and droids. I don't mind this at all, but the thing I don't like is that not only do you have to level them up just to make them available, you also have to buy them with credits. This also goes for any of the actual primary weapons in the game and the character customization. There are other games that have this sort of unlocking format, and I don't know, I've just never liked it in any game I've played. There are no weapon attachments of any kind, which in a way is a good thing because it simplifies the gameplay, although it also kinda sucks because it gives you virtually no reason to try out any of the other guns in the game. That's what I loved about games like Call of Duty, Battlefield, and plenty of others. They have incentives giving you the reason to try out anything you're not yet comfortable with, whether it's a camo, an XP bonus, attachments, or other aesthetic things, really anything at all. Obviously, I'm not saying Battlefront needs weapon camos or anything like that, this is just an example, but give players a reason to try new things. Because there are a ton of players who will just sit there with whatever gun they start out with and only use that gun. Speaking of the guns, there are a total of 11, and the variety is alright, although I sometimes question if I even notice that much of a difference between one gun over the other in the same weapon class, like rifle versus rifle or pistol versus pistol. To me, they don't really do enough to distinguish themselves from each other, but I don't know, it may just be in my head. Since obviously the guns are blasters, you don't have to reload them. What they did is that if you fire the blaster too much, your guns will overheat and you won't be able to fire them again for some time. If you do overheat your gun, you have a chance to instantly cool it down. The only problem is if you mess up, your gun now takes much longer to cool down. One thing to note, you cannot pick up any weapons from fallen allies or dead enemy players. I'm not quite sure why they did this, because there are times where I've been in situations and a gun that I currently have is not going to benefit me. Like for example, say I have a pistol that is great for close range. If the next objective is more out in the open, I don't really want to be out there because I know that I'm more likely going to get my ass kicked against someone with a rifle. Yeah, I can make the argument against that by saying just equip a long-range weapon on my star card, but I don't know, in 2015, picking up weapons should kinda be a staple in first-person shooters, or any shooter for that matter. There are power-ups that drop on the ground randomly, including hero and vehicle pickups. Now, the vehicle pickups I notice tend to spawn in the exact same spots over and over, but I rarely ever find hero pickups. I don't know if there's some weird algorithm behind how or where they spawn, but I get a hero maybe once every 10 games or so, and one hero of which is just flat out ridiculously overpowered. Of the 3 times I've used Boba Fett, I've never died. Not only that, but I've made it to the very top of the leaderboards every single time I've used him. His weapons are amazing by themselves, and then of course you have the jetpack, which is great in every aspect, both using it offensively and defensively. He's by far the best hero of the game in my opinion. Vader and Luke are also really good if you know what you're doing, but none of them are as good as Boba Fett. The other power-ups you can find are things like super powerful grenades, turrets, power shield, orbital strikes, and others, all of which are incredibly useful in their own way, and much like with the hero pickups, I believe these are just randomly spawned throughout the map. But unlike the hero pickups, these are easily found, and you'll most likely come across one every 30 seconds or so if you're moving around. As far as controlling the vehicles, well, the AT-AT is awesome to control. It really is. It's so much fun. The ATST, not so much, only because they're very, very easily destroyed. Like, all you need to do is have 3 or 4 guys all shoot an ion rocket at it, and it's down. The aircrafts, thankfully, are very easily controlled, unlike the planes in the Battlefield games that can take quite a long time to get used to and familiarize yourself with. Although, again, much like with the ATSTs, they get destroyed very quickly, even by ground units firing a couple rockets at them. The good thing is that all the vehicles I felt were fun to use, and whenever I got kills using them, or even destroying a walker with the tow cables, it's all very rewarding.
Neutralize that Imperial Walker immediately, before it opens fire on the main power generator. The Walker has taken serious damage. Shake that missile lock. Seeker inbound.
Alright, I've been avoiding it for a while, but let's talk about the actual combat of Battlefront. At first, I absolutely loved it and had loads of fun, you know, with a big smile on my face. It was great! Until I realized after maybe 2 hours of playing, I was already getting bored of it. Here's the problem that I have, and a lot of other people are having. The combat is so basic, it's so overly simplified, that it gets far too repetitive, far too quickly. And hear me out, it's not like the game needs to be heavily complicated or anything, it just needs to have that balance between complexity and simplicity. The gameplay has to be interesting enough to where you want to play more of it, and Battlefront just flat out fails in that aspect. Take away the Star Wars gimmick of the game. Star Wars is obviously why 95% or so the reason why we're all playing it. If you take that out, what is left? A shallow game with really nothing going for it, honestly. Here's something I really hate about the gameplay. In fact, it's probably what I hate the most. There are no soldier classes like in the previous Battlefront games. What this means is that no matter what, you can pick whatever weapon you want and whatever star card abilities and special weapons, whatever that you want. I'm sure most of you are trying to figure out why I don't like this. Allow me to explain. Without classes and limitations on what you can use, it makes the game far easier than I think it should. Not only that, but it ruins any sort of team-based strategy. If everyone wanted, they could all run ion cannons to destroy any type of vehicle, an A280C rifle, which is great for pretty much every situation you'll come across in the game, and a jetpack. You're getting the best of everything, really. You can take down infantry easy. You can destroy vehicles easy. You can escape gunfights or get to another place much quicker than those without jetpacks. Here's another way to think about this. Both Black Ops 3 and Black Ops 2 have a pick 10 system that allows you to pick up to 10 items per class. Okay, imagine if they said screw that and you could put 6 attachments on the primary, 3 attachments on the secondary, grenades, tech grenades, and 6 perks. That would just be bullshit and you wouldn't be sacrificing anything. It totally kills the strategy behind making a class. That's equivalent to how I feel about Battlefront. Another thing that really sucks is Walker Assault and Supremacy both only have 4 maps. So if you're like me and love Walker Assault, you're only going to be able to play on 4 different maps, while Team Deathmatch and other game modes have over 10. Doesn't that seem wrong to anyone else? Not just that, but there's only 4 planets in this game. Hoth, Endor, Tatooine, and Solus, not counting the free Jakku DLC, I get that. What happened to Yavin 4? What happened to Dagobah? How about the Death Star? You know, all these other maps and modes that could have been put in the game, I almost guarantee are now going to be DLC. Which is just bullshit, because it makes the game feel unfinished, like they intentionally took out some maps that they were going to put in the final product, and now we're going to have to pay 15 or however much on a DLC pack, or $50 for the season's pass. Seriously, 4 maps on probably the most played mode in the game? Come on, guys, that's just ridiculous.
Missile closing on your position. They're locking with the missile.
We failed to halt the rebel transport. Pathetic.
You can have simplicity, but you also have to have a good amount of content for the players. Battlefront fails to have that content. Even the older games had like 100 times more stuff than this edition of Battlefront, and that's really sad and disappointing when you think about it. Then again, to be fair, Battlefront does have a good amount of modes to mess around with. Some of them are kind of fun every now and then, like Heroes vs. Villains, Droid Run, and Drop Zone, but if you want to get the best experience out of the game, Walker Assault is the mode to play. So that about sums up Battlefront 2015. I would have loved to have talked more about the gameplay and stuff, but there's really nothing to it. I had a hard time even finding anything to talk about. As I said, the game feels unfinished. Why is there no galactic campaign? Why can't you play with random people online in survival mode? Why are there only a few worlds and barely any maps compared to previous Battlefront titles? Why do you expect me to spend $50 on a season's pass for a game that's lacking in almost every single aspect besides graphics and sound? These are questions I don't have a good answer to. Don't get me wrong, I do like the gameplay. It's fun, it's enjoyable, but only for like an hour or two every other day because of how insanely repetitive it is. There's a phrase out there that goes something like this: it leaves you wanting more. That's Battlefront in a nutshell, both in terms of gameplay and content. I guess if you want more from the game, you're going to have to spend the money either on a DLC pack or the Season's Pass, but there's no way in hell I'll be doing that. Do I recommend this game? It pains me to say this, it really does, but no, not really. There's nothing there that Battlefront does better than any other first-person shooter. While again, it's fun for a short while, it's not worth $60. If anything, I would recommend waiting until this game drops to $20 to $25 in probably a year or two, and I don't even know if it's really worth that. If anything, I would recommend renting this over buying it, just to see if you like it or not. Seriously consider what I'm about to say. If this wasn't a Star Wars game, and it was just some other random sci-fi thing with its own separate vehicles, spaceships, whatever, but everything else was exactly the same as far as the core gameplay and how everything works, do you think this game would get much sales or any good reviews at all? I'd be willing to bet a lot of money the answer to that would be no. This is by far the longest review I've ever done, and of course this is all just my opinion. Some of you will love this game, and that's perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with that. I wish I loved this game as well, I just don't. And you know what, I love games that a majority of people hate, and that's also perfectly fine. Anyway guys, that's it for me. I want to thank you all very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video.